Check 1 2, check 1 2. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. This one is in response to an email I received. I'll call it from Stressed in Sacramento. And the message goes like this. It goes, "Hi Duane, I've been watching your YouTube videos a lot over the past year and dealing with my high conflict divorce. I have a 4-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter would like to talk about my situation. I currently think my ex is a covert narc who is trying very hard to keep the kids away or alienated from me. I currently have supervised visits 3 days a week, third-party supervised, and FaceTime 10 minutes a day the days I don't see the kids in person. I work, she stays at home, and our court order is for FaceTime to be at home with no distractions. But my ex continuously either isn't at home when FaceTiming or doesn't FaceTime at all. I hybrid no contact, communicate only via email, sometimes text, but her tactic is to get me to act out, but I don't." Very good. Glad you're not doing that. "I have a whole story I'd like to talk with you about and to get your help I'm dealing with. I really enjoy your efforts and show and really would like to touch base. I also catch Alex Falcone's, who's the proper person if you guys don't know, shows, and you two have been spot on with a lot of what I'm experiencing." He goes on to talk about not being able to hit the live shows, which is understandable, and says, "Would really appreciate if you could make some time for me as I get stressed and need some support." Okay, so and this story, it unfortunately is rather common. That's why I figured it would be a good idea to make a video out of this, because there's probably a lot of people who would appreciate or need the same information or the same questions answered, or at least the advice. The first thing I want to hit on this, and it's a benefit, is the age of your kids. The fact that your kids are young enough, it's going to make it that much harder for your ex to really implement the parental alienation. I think it's much more complicated. Let me back up. I know it's much more complicated when the kids are older, because the alienation kicks in quick, and it makes it a lot more complicated. I've mentioned in other videos that I've had the easiest time with my youngest child, and at the time of divorce, she was 6 years old, and she was the one that was the least impacted by all the shenanigans and everything that was going on. And basically, younger kids just want to love the other parent. Now, obviously, supervised visitation and FaceTime makes it complicated, but the good part about this, and the reason the court's doing this, in my opinion, is they're trying to make sure that you have that connection and that they can rebuild your relationship with them. Excuse me. And what I wrote down here on the next one is a typical goal of supervised visitation is to ultimately get the parent to be able to spend more time and not require supervised visitation. I mean, everything, even though family court is a freaking nightmare, just beyond belief, bottom line is they're trying to make sure that the kids have a relationship with both parents. So even when you have an alienating parent, the court, until things really go south, that's what their goal is going to be. So you can use that to your advantage to try to deal with some of the crap that's going on and, deal with that. And one of the things, like I mentioned before, is with the age of the kids, it typically helps you out quite a bit in that regard. And the good part about it is if you can get things semi-stable before they get a little bit older, and you've been able to really get a good relationship or a good bond with them, and everything your ex is doing is to try to sabotage that, right? I mean, that's what, that, I know that, everybody listening and watching this knows that. The main thing on that is when you are interacting with your kids on the supervised visitation, make darn sure that you are doing everything right. I mean, unfortunately, when any of us are in this situation to where we've been targeted like this, you have to bring your A game every time. It's like a job. You have to look at it like a critical job interview. every time you go. You want to make darn sure that you're doing everything you're supposed to do, that everything they're observing, that even if they say, now, Mr. Bill, you shouldn't talk about that, or, you shouldn't be doing this, make sure you make a note of it. Make sure you're like, oh, I'm sorry, and don't do it again, right? Make sure that you understand what's going on. There's a lot of times where people who have supervised visitation and they're fighting it. What will happen is they will start getting into a adversarial relationship with the person conducting the supervised visitation. Oftentimes, those people write reports and provide them to the court system. And the last thing you need is for them to say, unfortunately, you are not stable, or you're not following the rules, or you're being inappropriate, or that supervised visitation needs to stay the same. This is a long, complicated process. The next thing that potentially could be helping you, or could help you on this, is the fact that your ex is violating the court order. If you're saying that the court order says that you are supposed to have FaceTime connection for 10 minutes on the days that you do not, so like you said, you get supervised visitation 3 days a week. So for the other 2 days, you're supposed to get FaceTime 10 minutes. That is, and it's in the evening, if I remember correctly. There's no reason that shouldn't be easy for your ex to do. So document every time that it's scheduled that she isn't there, or that they're someplace else. Don't get into an argument with her. Don't turn around and say, Susie, you're supposed to be at home. It's a waste of energy. Don't do it. Document it. If you want to bring it up once or twice just to say, hey, aren't you supposed to be at home or whatever? You could do that, but just document what's going on and just basically provide that to your attorney. And, maybe mention it to the person conducting the supervised visitation. But I would be cautious on that. I would really focus on your supervised visitation, on your time with the kids, to maximize that time that you have, doing your stuff or hanging out with them. Okay. So, but document everything she does wrong. It potentially could help you, and it goes to help demonstrate that the other parent isn't trying to work within the system to help you rehabilitate and to be able to have a better relationship with your kids, which is what the whole point of it is. And she's fighting it, right? So you can use that information later. If you remember correctly, you mentioned Alex Falcone, who runs A Proper Person. For you guys who aren't familiar, I would definitely encourage you to check him out. He kind of started out, no, not kind of, he did start out in that same mode where in the beginning, he had supervised visitation. Well, it wasn't necessarily court ordered, but that's what it started out as. He did that, and ultimately over time, he was able to go from the non-custodial parent to having 50-50, to having majority time, to ultimately having his ex's parental rights terminated because of her own actions, and his son ultimately adopted by his new wife. And that's not an easy task to do. So there's a lot involved with that. So, just where you're starting out now doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be where you are later. Now, you have to make sure that you don't make mistakes. You have to make sure that, like you mentioned in your email about your ex trying to basically push your buttons to get you to react, you have to make darn sure you don't react. And you have to be absolutely prepared that she's going to be pushing you, poking you in the eye, trying to get you to respond in a negative way, so that she can use that as further evidence that the supervised visitation should be reduced, the time with the kids should be reduced, and your access should even be more curtailed. That's ultimately her goal. That's very apparent with what she's doing. Problem is you're in a situation where the court has already established this, or they're either erring on the side of caution, and that's the mode you're in. So unfortunately, when we're dealt a deck like this, you play the hand you've been dealt with. You do what you're supposed to do. Show up at the visitations. Do it the right way. Now here's the other thing. Make darn sure that all those FaceTime visitation times that you do it, because I can guarantee you that if you stop doing it, your ex is going to document how we were ready. We were ready at 6 p.m. on whatever days, Monday and Friday, or whatever days you have to, you don't have your supervised visitation, and we'll document that you're not interested and you're not exercising the limited time that you have. And she would do the exact same thing. She would turn around and try to say, well, it's only a 10-minute call and he can't do that, right? And that's what this whole thing is trying to get you frustrated to not do it, to give her more of a bigger arsenal of information to try to sabotage your thing. One thing I wrote down here is, you've already recognized that she's baiting you and she's trying to trick you. That is awesome, because a lot of people don't get it, or a lot of people cannot connect those dots before they make a mistake. And I'm not saying this is the easiest thing in the world. I've made my own share of mistakes. Thank God they weren't to the level that it blew everything up in my face. But there were a couple of times where I didn't recognize what was happening. You're dealing with it in real time, and I made some mistakes. And I've talked about one of them in the past where they threatened that they were calling the cops and that I was stalking her and all this stupid garbage, which ultimately she wasn't doing. But that's what they were basically saying. And it was a fear tactic to try to basically regain control, get me in line and try to get me scared to give up and to give her what she wanted. Fortunately, in my situation, as I've mentioned in the past, she needs me to work, so she couldn't play that too much, in my opinion, because if she did, there was a possibility I would lose my job and she would have lost her retirement for the last, I say retirement, it's not really, what I mean is being able to live off me for the last 6 years. Trying to make a joke out of that, I don't know if that was funny. Anyways, but I'm glad you're able to see that. Focus in on that. Keep focused on that, man. I mean, the only thing I would say is, if your visitation time, if you are so stressed that you do not think that you would be able to exercise your visitation time without making a mistake, then cancel it. Then that's a type of situation where missing that, although missing it is bad, it is much better to not have a negative response or do something that is more catastrophic than just to not show up and then be able to say, hey, I was working, I couldn't get off work, I got stuck in traffic, I know my internet died, whatever the thing is. Just keep that in mind. I've talked about that in the past about mutual events, that if you are not able to spend that time, I don't think you're doing this, but if if a situation arises where that situation might be too much for you to be able to deal with, do not put yourself in that situation. Think about that for a minute, because you got to look at if you make the mistake of doing something wrong, what's the consequence to that as opposed to not showing up, right? I mean, granted, it bugs the kids a little bit, but I have done that in the past. Early on in this, there was a few times where I got nailed with extra special court information, the day of or the day before a shared event at school. And I knew that I was not in a mental capacity to be able to sit across from her, sit next to her. And I was worried that if anything was said, that I would not be able to hold it together. And I didn't go. I had to work. I was unable to go. And to be honest, she's done the same thing. She's not showed up at certain times. Typically, when she feels like she's not winning, she won't show up. When she feels like she's winning like she does now, she'll show up to everything, which is what's happening now. She'll show up to everything. So just want to throw that out there. And the final thing I want to leave you with, and I know this isn't the greatest thing in the world, but I've used both of these now. I'm going to use two different analogies. And the first one is, this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is a long, prolonged journey, and you have to pace yourself and focus on the end goal. Because if you sprint and when you're doing a marathon, you'll burn yourself out. You won't be able to finish it. Another analogy I've been using on this is the battle versus the war analogy. And my thing on that is, you can pick little situations that you don't want to let them win, and you can fight, and you might win. You might actually win these things, but in the long term, it might not be a scenario to where you're building your victories to get you to ultimately win the war. Sometimes you lose some of those battles to ultimately win the war. For instance, on your situation, this FaceTime thing where what she's doing, potentially, I mean, you could make an issue out of that and do something that could potentially cost you the war by lashing out, sending nasty texts, sending nasty emails, or worse, doing something in person or something. And, and there could be a catastrophic consequence on that. Whereas if you take this situation, you document it, you don't necessarily attack that particular thing, but you use that to build up your arsenal of arrows to attack later with, and it could ultimately turn the tide to have you win the entire war, or to ultimately change everything. So I hope that was helpful. If anybody else has some things they want to add to this, please consider doing that in the comments below. If somebody's had some success with the supervised visitation scenario, to where they were able to do it and then ultimately get past it to be able to have more time with their kids, share that. If you've made some mistakes and you want to share that and the consequences and what happened, consider doing that as well. Or if you want to, you can send me an email. On that, I've been doing a lot of these videos where I'm getting questions from people or asking for advice via email or even on comments. So if you want to do that, you can email me at Duane@dadssurvivingdivorce.com, or you can just comment on different videos, and sometimes I've grabbed those out of that. So on that, if this channel is helpful to you, if you think that this is good information and is helping you deal with it, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so that YouTube will actually tell you whenever new videos are posted. I'm trying to do a little bit more right now. Typically, I do at least 1 or 2 a week is my normal goal. And on that, if you're new to this, I would recommend the Mindset for Narcissistic Abuse Recovery playlist that has about 45 videos that really covers from the beginning part about this to help you get the mindset in the right way to deal with the hybrid no contact, absolute thinking, black hole thinking, and the illusion of what the relationship was, can help you to deal with the daily issues of this in the beginning. And the card above that is a video that YouTube specifically has recommended for you based on your search terms, so it might be something that you're interested in. So check that out. On that, I hope this was helpful, and I will chat with you on the next video. Take care.